So this is what the dream feels like. This is the victory we longed for.
Hi, I'm Sam, and welcome to Late to the Party, a new look at old media. Early on into the life cycle of the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 came Rockstar Games' first entry into its new HD GTA universe with the release of Grand Theft Auto 4. The updates and technology allowed for a much more detailed and fleshed out world, and the separation from the 3D universe allowed for a clean slate for storytelling. Liberty City was more grounded in realism, and with that came a more gritty and frankly depressing story overall. Where its predecessors were all amazing in their own right, Grand Theft Auto 4 stands out mainly due to the life and journey of its protagonist, Niko Bellic.
Niko, my cousin! I couldn't believe it, you're here! Welcome to America!
Bravo,
From moment one, you realize that Niko is different because unlike other protagonists up to this point, Niko is actually a foreigner. He gets to experience America from a fresh perspective and gets to learn the ins and outs of life in Liberty City, for better and for worse. And it all starts here at the docks, with his absolutely plastered cousin, Roman, greeting him with open arms, excited to help him start his new journey here right.
My cousin is here!
Whoa,
We got to know the
come on.
His stories of lavish cars, voluptuous women, and exotic mansions may have been an absolute steaming pile of crap, but the love between these two family members is obviously there.
So, you full of crap or what?
What?
Unbeknownst to Roman, however, is Niko's true intentions of why he came here in the first place. It's been almost a decade since Roman moved to America, and a lot can happen to a person in a decade. Roman worked his way up from absolutely nothing to owning his cab depot and a small, if not dingy little apartment near his place of business, all while keeping a very positive attitude despite his numerous shortcomings. During that time, though, Niko was at war in his own country. Niko was born into what is modern-day Serbia, and instead of leaving to the States with Roman, Niko wanted to fight. If you look into the police database, you'll see that Niko was born in 1978, making him an early teenager during his enlistment and only 30 during the events of this game, and it's made clear on his face how aged it's all made him. He never had a chance to live what is considered a normal life. He grew up in an extremely abusive household, in a war-ravaged country, saw and actively participated in horrific atrocities, and afterward, got involved with human traffickers simply to survive. After a very inebriated Roman shows Niko his current living situation, it's established that despite being as close as they are, Niko hasn't told him much about what's been going on in his life, and is very distant at first.
Ooh, mystery man! Strange and exotic sailor! What happened? Did your captain make you pregnant?
Screw you! No, it's nothing like that.
But, after being teased a little, he sits down with Roman, and proceeds to stare into nothing as he recounts what it was like to be at war at such a young age, concluding that, perhaps, his actions weren't justified by the anger and wrath he felt at the time. In a perfect world, Niko would have benefited greatly from some sound advice and support from his cousin here. But, naturally,
Roman! Are you sleeping, you fat
No,
fuck?
no way.
Come on!
What's the time? Shit, I've got to get the cab back. It's on the shift.
upon arriving at Roman's taxi service for the first time, Niko is introduced to Mallory, Roman's love interest, and surprisingly, one of the very few things he didn't over-exaggerate. They share a brief brotherly moment together as Roman talks up Mallory.
Mallory, the beautiful girl I tell you about. See? Not everything I tell you is bullshit.
I bet most of it was.
Hey.
I hope you're less full of shit than your cousin over here.
Thank you. This is the woman that I'm going to marry.
Whatever you say.
Sadly, though, before too many pleasantries, they're rudely interrupted by Roman's loan shark.
You should lose few pounds. Otherwise, this beautiful lady is going to leave.
This scumbag, Vladimir, uses what little power and influence he has to bully Roman in every conceivable way.
I'll get you the money.
I know. And Roman, tell this fucking yokel here, if he doesn't stop staring at me, I'll have his head chopped off and put a film of it on the internet!
Niko obviously isn't a fan of Vlad, but ends up getting exploited into working for him to cover Roman's debt for a little while.
Vlad, name doesn't ring any bells. I'm sorry.
You better start remembering important people, you dumb peasant. Your cousin owes me a lot of money. If you don't want to make things real difficult for him, you are going to come to Cameron's bar in Mohawk. I have a work for you.
Vlad makes him participate in all manners of enforcer missions, getting protection money, stealing someone's car to pay a debt, and even goes so far as to blackmail Niko to be his hitman.
I don't need a bat to teach a lesson.
Vlad insults and demeans Niko the entire time, and it's clear that he's just a touch unstable.
Well, say something! You're so fucking laid back! Warren! Come on!
After some time passes, Niko will find Roman drowning his sorrows in a bottle after having just learned of Mallory's affair with Vlad.
I saw his car parked outside her place the other day.
Yeah.
Something, as the player, we are totally aware of by this point.
You fucking knew?
What was I going to say?
You knew my woman was banging this warthog and you didn't do anything?
I didn't
say it? You're an asshole, Niko, believe.
After insulting Niko in a drunken fit, the next mission sees Niko hunting down Vlad as his rage finally hits a breaking point.
I'm not going to stand here and have you call me disloyal. You might let some Russian asswipe bang your woman, but I won't.
But you fucking did!
That was before I knew you cared!
Despite Roman's pleas, Niko is on the warpath and is set to put Vlad 6 feet down, convinced that if he doesn't end their hostilities now, Vlad will just come after Roman and him later on.
Fucking yokel! You think you can get away with killing me?
I guess I'll find out!
Niko proceeds to execute Vlad right there on the docks.
You were the stupid one, Vladdy boy. Nobody fucks with my family.
Up to this point, Niko has avoided any questions from Roman regarding exactly what happened overseas and in his time of war. They both lived through it, but while Roman came to America, Niko willingly chose to continue fighting because, as he explains later on, he was just a really angry kid.
When you going to tell me properly about what happened? I'm not going to judge you.
When you got time.
There, I have time.
Another time. Can I help?
And now, sitting over Vlad's corpse, Niko tells Roman the real reason he came to Liberty City.
When I was in the army, we were going on a mission to ambush a squad who had killed a lot of innocent people. They were our enemies, but we never did it. There were 15 of us, all boys from the village. But one of us betrayed the group. It was a setup. For money. 12 people died. 3 escaped. I know the traitor was not me. So for 10 years, I've been searching for the other 2. One of them lives here.
Why are you telling me this now? Do you always get sentimental after you kill people?
While Roman does have a point, questioning why now of all times Niko would bring up what happened, in a twisted way, I've always viewed this as Niko's explanation as to why he is the way he is.
Well, what?
I just want to know why they did it.
A piece of Niko's soul died that day, and the only thing that really drives him since is his deeply devoted rage and need for an answer. After heaving Vladimir's corpse into the river and fleeing the area, Niko will later get a call from Roman, convinced that he's being watched. While this is initially played off as a comical paranoia, Roman's actually correct. Powerful crime lords aren't happy about Vlad and want a little chat with the Bellics.
No! I'm tied up in the basement a long way from home. Some ape threatens me with a hacksaw. No, I'm not that smart.
After nearly getting tortured with a hacksaw, Niko is introduced to Mikhail Faustin and Dmitry Raskolov, the 2 heads of a Russian crime syndicate. Seeing him as both amusing and useful, Faustin forces Niko into working for him. Just like Vlad before, they use Niko for their dirty work in exchange for keeping him and Roman alive.
We'll take care of your cousin, but you better get a police car, and then you call me.
Some really interesting things happen during these string of missions, as this is where the first act of the game concludes, and you're introduced to the larger scale of things afterward. While Faustin himself is a short-fused madman, there is one instance where we see Niko in a rare, quiet moment, talking with Faustin's abusive wife, Elena, sharing their respective griefs. She talks about how Faustin wasn't always this way, and that he was actually a beautiful man back in Russia. She wonders what changed, and if she potentially caused this. Niko, perhaps understanding her husband better than he initially realized, replies,
Life is complicated. I never thought I'd live like this.
No?
When the war came, I did bad things. But after the war, I thought nothing of doing bad things. I killed people, smuggled people, sold people.
And you don't worry about your soul?
After you walk...
Perhaps seeing that Niko is different from the usual crooks and killers she's grown accustomed to seeing in and out of her home all the time, she tells Niko that God is complicated and that he shouldn't lose hope. Even this abused and broken woman can see the little spark of humanity that still resides within Niko somewhere. This scene is easy to gloss over, but the final statement from Elena is echoed throughout the entire game. Niko doesn't actively choose to do violent acts. The only reason he starts doing them in Liberty City is because he's more or less forced to survive at the moment. One thing I think a lot of players forget is that Niko would have been heavily trained in hand-to-hand combat and firearms due to his experience in the military, so it would make sense why so many criminals and crime lords find him so useful. Which leads me to Dmitry Raskolov. Dmitry is Faustin's underboss and longtime friend, and acts as the voice of reason during Faustin's many fits of rage. They were in prison together, they grew their organization in Liberty City together, and they even got tattoos representing their brotherhood. However, Faustin slowly grew unhinged and cold towards everyone, including Dmitry. It's clear that his substance abuse has led him to regularly jump to drastic conclusions and rash choices, and it's these choices that eventually catch up with him. After not being able to stop him from ordering an assassination, Dmitry has Niko kill Faustin to settle a blood debt from a rival crime family. He seemingly laments this decision, but justifies it by telling Niko his philosophy.
You know, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we must obey the rules of the game. We can pick the game, Niko Bellic, but we cannot change the rules.
It's here that we can arguably believe that Niko is done working for Dmitry, having just murdered his best friend. But when Niko goes to collect his money, Dmitry shows up with an old friend of his.
Hello, Niko.
Hello, Mr. Bulgarin.
Bulgarin is one of the people Niko had the displeasure of working for after his time in the war. This man is the head of a human trafficking ring and has been hunting down Niko for the better part of a year to collect on a job that supposedly went wrong.
I don't know what happened. I nearly drowned.
My heart is bleeding.
I did my best. I didn't fuck up.
And now, thanks to Dmitry, Bulgarin now knows where Niko is. Niko fights his way out and swears bloody vengeance on Dmitry for selling him out.
I will bring Dmitry down myself. I promise you this.
It's at this point where a very understandably paranoid Roman calls Niko and has Niko meet up with him. Niko obliges and is handed his opportunity to inform Roman that they just might have bigger problems on their hands right now. The Russian crime lords have a price on Niko's head and know where he lives.
So we're dead.
More or less.
Though initially upset over all this, Roman relents and suggests the two go back home to regroup and figure out a plan.
Come on. Let's go back to the apartment.
During the journey, the two share some pretty heavy dialogue with each other. On the way to the apartment, Roman tells Niko of a dream he's recently had, where he and Mallory are married, own a place of their own, and welcome guests to dine with them and enjoy the warmth that comes with good company. A place to settle down.
It's a place of distinction, you know?
I can't see myself settling down.
Not now, but in the dream you've met the right woman. She's beautiful, pure like my Mallory. In the dream, Mallory and me are married and everything is perfect. This could be the start of that. A fresh beginning.
That perfect fantasy, for as peaceful as it sounds, is crushed the instant the two men discover that Niko's enemies have burned down both their apartment and Roman's taxi business. Everything Roman worked so hard for is now gone, and he is absolutely devastated. To console him, Niko reminds his cousin of a bar they went to back home when they were younger, and found it burned to the ground. They found a single, undamaged bottle of vodka, and the two polished it off while still standing in the ashes of a place that once meant so much to them. Roman has an idea to call Mallory, who, thankfully, has a place the two can crash while they figure things out further. When the two arrive at their temporary apartment in Bohan, the island next over, Roman, ever the optimist, bounces nearly completely back, with Niko upset over the events of the last few missions.
What's wrong? Where should I start? All right, I'll start with you. What's wrong with you? 15 minutes ago, you were cowering in fear because you didn't know what was going to happen. Now, you know everything is shit, and we're going to be killed, and you're all cheerful. I don't get it.
I guess I'm an optimist.
An idiot, not an optimist.
Now, having been burned out of Hove Beach and having to start completely from scratch, it's actually Mallory who sees Niko's need for work and introduces him to Elizabetha Torres, a coke queen with connections to just about every drug deal in town.
So, tough guy, you know about this business?
I know about protection. What do you need?
Working for her actually ends up being extremely fruitful for Niko in many more ways than one. He gets connections to a number of other characters, namely including Packy McCreary, who is a core member of the local Irish crime mob.
Alright, tough guy, let's do this.
Sure.
See you later, Niko.
Goodbye.
And will you call Michelle again? She really likes you.
Yeah.
Niko does really well by Packy, and this leads him down a mission tree that involves Niko working for most of the members of his family. After working for Elizabetha for a while, she makes it clear that someone screwed up at some point and got a large stash of her drugs ripped off of her. Niko goes in, fights off a biker gang for the coke, and escapes a heavy police presence, arriving at a meet point only, after all that, to get ripped off himself. Unfortunately, from someone Niko knows.
What are you doing here? This is no place for you, Michelle.
As it happens, it is. You see, Niko, I have been working for the government. I'm afraid it's my job to watch you.
Michelle is a woman Niko is introduced to and encouraged to date very early on in the game. She seems shady from the get-go and avoids some of Niko's questions about her life. Should the player choose to date her, she'll ask Niko all manner of questions about who he is, what he's been doing, and if he's in any sort of trouble with any local gangs.
Into some trouble. I had to help him out.
Really? Does Roman get himself into a lot of trouble? Is he involved in criminal stuff?
Roman? He's made some mistakes. Got involved with people he shouldn't have, but really, he is a legitimate businessman.
What about you?
I'm just trying to make the right decisions.
Niko understandably skirts away from these more invasive questions and reveals very little truth of who he is and what he's doing here. Aside from the first date, the player isn't required to continue dating her for the story to progress, and I don't think I'm alone in saying I chose not to. And now here, in a grimy back alley, she reveals that she's working for a secret government organization taking down Elizabetha's drug empire. The only reason Niko isn't going down as well is his usefulness to them.
You fucking bitch.
Niko is forced to give over the stash to her and, once again, gets tied up working for someone he doesn't want to. Only this time, he's working for the government.
So why use me?
We always use people like you. Karen, Michelle, she was the same. Someone with something to lose, but not much to live for.
The biggest and really only benefit in working for this man is he has vast connections all over the world and has promised Niko his help in finding who he seeks here in Liberty. Niko begrudgingly works for him, both to keep himself out of jail and as a way to satisfy his bloodlust for his betrayer.
And hey, welcome to America. La Scala Stara Dejava.
Bushka.
Thankfully, as Niko continues his journey here in Liberty, he discovers that it's not all just wrath and greed. In working with the Irish mob, Niko is met with the one silver lining in Liberty City, the little sister of Packy, Katie McCreary. Katie is one of the most unique characters in all of GTA lore, because despite her life being surrounded by crime, she is, for lack of a better term, an innocent person. She doesn't hold the same drug habits her family does, she doesn't participate in criminal activity, and she expects very little of her siblings, going as far as saying all she expects from them is to put flowers on their coffins. When Niko gets wrapped up in the corruption and unstable business activities of her brothers, he's blackmailed by one of them and is forced to choose which one of two to assassinate.
It's sounding like I got no choice. One McCreary brother is going to get me to kill another.
Don't miss, Niko. You might hit me.
I'll hit who I'm aiming at. Don't worry.
The choice is ultimately left up to the player about who they kill, but either way, when Katie calls sometime later, fully unaware it was Niko who committed the slaying, she doesn't seem all that broken up and admittedly expected it to happen.
What did you think about it?
To be honest, I thought this would have happened earlier. Then again, I expect to get a call from the coroner about any one of my brothers every day. You going to be at the funeral?
Sure. I'll see you there, Kate. Goodbye.
Ironically, her brother Packy calls Niko at one point and asks him to call Kate so they can become closer and so she can get out of her otherwise isolated lifestyle. While you don't have to, the player now has the option to take her out on various activities, and despite disagreeing with Niko's lifestyle and having her own set of flaws, she's actually the most human out of all the dateable women in the game. A large portion of her character can be missed if the player doesn't take the time to go on activities with her. Something I'm honestly included in. She makes it obvious that she likes Niko from the get-go, but doesn't want to call it anything yet.
This isn't a date. We're just two people hanging out.
That's it. But it's nice. I'm enjoying myself.
Me too.
This seemingly takes the pressure off, and they quickly become friendly with each other. Unlike Michelle, who just wanted to use Niko for information, Kate is a genuine person who, like Niko, could really use a friend amidst the chaos.
Well, for a murdering, thieving idiot who can't talk about things, you're kind of nice.
Thank you.
Don't mention it.
By continuing to go out with her, the two will bond over their respective traumas, both Kate's extremely abusive upbringing and Niko's time in the Yugoslav War. How Kate's current surroundings are leaving her have to cope to survive, and how Niko wished he could take back what he saw in combat. Yes, they sometimes can be a bit abrasive with each other, but it seems to come from a general place of affection for one another. Each shares their own outlooks on life and hopes for the future. Kate is generally the only dateable woman that Niko seems to actively have fun with.
Do us a favor. Try not to freak out like you seem to when you get drunk.
Fuck you!
That's better.
I once saw an ex-friend turn enemy in passing, years after he stabbed me in the back. He was weathered, silent, and ashamed. Karma caught up to him in the end, if such a thing is to be believed. The wrath I had felt towards him for so long slowly dwindled after that. Rage can make you think some pretty strange things sometimes. Eventually, after being used and blackmailed by the government, Niko is finally handed his reward. His one purpose for living, his one reason for tomorrow. Darko Breverick, the man who sold out Niko's unit, is delivered to the airport cargo area for Niko to confront. Funny enough, the very first person Niko calls? Roman. Roman has served as a beacon of hope and humanity in Niko's time in Liberty City, and despite everything that's happened to him, Roman never loses faith in Niko. You can tell that without saying it, Roman understands Niko's pain. Roman and Niko grew up in the same household. They witnessed the atrocities around them as the war raged on, and they helped each other survive both back there and here in Liberty City. Despite always seemingly being a victim, Roman, after a brief period of despair, always seemingly bounces back with a positive attitude and a motivational charm.
And Roman, cousin, you're a dick.
He wants Niko to have fun with his life, despite being handed what he was given here. Introducing him to his friends, helping him with a free fast travel mechanic through his cab business, and helping Niko with various safe houses throughout the game. And despite the numerous messes that Roman gets into, Niko never hesitates to help him, aggressively protecting him from any and all threats. He gives you a lot to think about in this short journey to the docks. All the rage, all the pain, the guilt, the trauma, the disconnection Niko has held with him all through these years are finally about to have their bloody moment. But in seeing what a pathetic mess this excuse for a man is, Niko is suddenly torn and just wants to know why.
Strange choices! How much?
1,000.
Niko's life purpose for the last decade has been to actively hunt this man, and the choice is now given to the player on how they want to proceed.
You ruined me, you fuck!
Roman, seeing just how broken and aged Darko has become, tries to persuade you to leave him to his agony, living in a hell of his own making.
He knows what he did. It doesn't look like he enjoys life too much.
You say I ruined you? You were always a killer. I just helped you see that.
Yet, it is a valid option for the player to execute Darko in a maelstrom of fury and bullets, should they deem it necessary. If Niko does enact his revenge, while satisfying in the moment, it ultimately doesn't change anything, and leaves Niko feeling hollow and nihilistic.
This is the moment you've been waiting for so long, Niko. What do you mean you don't know how you feel?
I mean, I don't know. I feel empty, okay? I feel empty.
That's something, at least.
No, Roman. It's nothing.
If the player decides to spare Darko, it's a little bit more hopeful, and honestly, while the choice doesn't have any effect on what little of the story is left, I'd like to think this is the canonical choice. The mission that can take place directly before this one is called Pest Control, and sees Niko carry out a hit on a greedy mafia member. The player can ambush the target however they like, but at the end of it, after Niko cuts down another on the streets of Liberty City, something extremely easy to miss can happen. The player can choose to call Roman, and Niko will ultimately admit that his conscience is getting the better of him, and he doesn't know how much longer he can be this monster.
Why? What's wrong?
I think it's my conscience. I don't know.
Your conscience? Have you killed too many people, Niko?
Perhaps. That man who I worked for, Ray Boccino. I was asked to kill him, and I did. He was a cockroach. Pest. But I don't know how long I can keep on dealing in death.
This must be difficult, Niko. Maybe there is another path to take. A less violent one. I'll speak to you soon, okay?
Niko spares Darko because, as he explained to Roman afterward, if he killed him, Darko would just be another dead body to stand over. It wouldn't change anything that he's seen or he's done. It wouldn't bring his friends back. Revenge was his reason for living, and now that Niko understands it won't change anything, he remarks,
Only those who die get closure. Living too long. So
and from this point onward, it becomes clear that Niko wants to leave all the chaos behind and move on with his life. But, of course, this is Liberty City, a place where no one wins. After the events at the airport, the next mission, naturally, starts at a strip club, where Niko orders the first of any alcohol we've seen him consume in the game. But considering the choice he just had to make, this is pretty understandable. Unfortunately, Pegorino, a slimebag mafia boss that Niko's been reluctantly doing jobs for, shows up and asks one last favor of Niko. Make a drug deal with Dmitry Roskolov and live the rest of his life a very rich man, or be hunted down by his underlings as his family's last dissolving act. Niko, having probably agreed out of annoyance more than anything else, is immediately put into a moral dilemma, so naturally, he calls Roman. Roman, having apparently known the whereabouts of Dimitri, and caught in his excitement to now actually get married to Mallory, encourages Niko to take the deal with his nemesis so they can finally have a rich life he's always dreamed of. Having just learned of Dimitri's location, Niko is now caught between two choices: riches or revenge. He calls the only other person he would for advice: Kate. Kate, who by this point has slowly developed into a close friend and serious romantic interest, takes the high road and tells Niko that he shouldn't put aside his morals for money. The choice of whose advice to heed is more impactful than the player probably initially expects, and it directly impacts the conclusion of Niko's story. If Niko decides to put his morals aside and forget Dimitri's previous backstabbing, he accompanies Pegorino's underboss to the meeting spot, and, of course, is left to die by another betrayal from Dimitri.
Get this money and go home.
You know what? I thought, why should we hand over the age for this price? I thought it'd be easier if I just killed those guys and kept it.
Easier for who? What the fuck are you doing?
Niko ends up in a massive firefight, escapes with $250,000 meant for the deal, and cuts ties with the Mafia completely. While Roman is absolutely elated to hear the news of their newfound wealth, Kate is understandably pissed and doesn't even want to see Niko.
I decided to work with that guy. I don't know if it was the right decision, but I did it. They screwed me over again.
You see, Niko? You should have gone with your instinct not to trust him. I can't believe you could care about money that much.
Well, we do what we can to survive, kid. Are you coming to Roman's wedding?
I don't think so, Niko. I don't want to be around you right now.
On the other hand, if the player decides that revenge is not in fact a fool's game, Niko will Rambo his way through Dimitri's bodyguards and confront the bastard head-on.
Now you're paying for it. Shame that'll be the second last thing that goes into your head. Goodbye.
The player will enact sweet revenge on the very same ship that Niko arrived on, and will no longer need to worry about the threat of Dimitri over either him or Roman. The sad thing is, whoever's advice Niko chooses to take, that person will ultimately wind up dead. If the player listens to Roman, just as his wedding is concluding, an assassin set by Dimitri will attempt to shoot Niko in the back, but before Niko can avert this, Roman is caught in the crossfire. That empty look says it all. Roman was Niko's soul savior here in Liberty City. He pretty much successfully convinced Niko that his life of chaos, crime, and bloodshed needed to stop because there wasn't really any end goal or point to any of it. When Niko wakes up in his Bohan apartment sometime later, he is primed to pay Dimitri back in blood. If, however, you decide that Dimitri needed to die, Kate will accompany Niko to the wedding, and they share a very hopeful conversation on their way there. For a brief moment, we see Niko with a genuine smile on his face, enjoying his life for the first time in probably years. This peace only lasts seconds before gunfire from Pegorino, livid over his family's collapse, riddles the crowd, and bullets meant for Niko mistakenly hit Kate.
Niko, come on! Somebody call an ambulance! Call a fucking ambulance! She's dead! What?
When Kate is slain, Niko is absolutely crushed with grief. He blames himself. He needs to be convinced to leave her body, and when he wakes up in the apartment this time around, he's very slow to rise, and says he should have protected her. Kate was Niko's ticket to a normal life, a normal relationship. In their conversation leading up to the events of the wedding, it becomes obvious that Niko wants to try with Katie to have a family and settle down legitimately, like his cousin is about to.
I'll look after you, Kate. I promise I'll protect you. There's nothing else I can say.
You don't need to say anything else.
Instead, he is left just as devoid of joy as before all of this. Whatever ends up happening at the wedding, Niko's friend little Jacob tracks down the man responsible, and after a lengthy, bullet-ridden chase ensues, Niko will succeed in cornering the killer, taunting them before their respective deaths.
Big talk. You want to know something funny?
Not really.
The commission, the old families, I know some of those guys. And they thought you were a fat fucking joke.
Whatever.
A joke!
Niko's last canonical line to Roman, now celebrating the fact that they avenged Kate, is fittingly,
Really? I don't know. What did I do?
further emphasizing the hopelessness that Niko feels after losing Kate. He walks away void of any emotion. On the other hand, if Roman is slain, Niko's last line ends up being,
Roman never hurt anyone.
and coldly stares at little Jacob when he states they've won and they need to go. Kate, a little while later, will reach out to Niko and initially say that she'll be there for him, but if enough time passes, she'll actually end their relationship as she needs to figure out where she's going, emphasizing that it's not Niko's fault for who he is, but ultimately needs to be away from the damage that lifestyle ultimately causes. This leaves Niko with very little, if anything, left here. Avenging Roman or Kate doesn't change anything. The life Niko was ready to leave behind wasn't just going to let him walk away completely unscathed.
So this is what the dream feels like. This is the victory we longed for.
It's been established that at this point, the GTA universe has a moving timeline, meaning that now in 2023, it's also 2023 in the most recent game, GTA Online, and that has canonically continued since that entry. Players of Grand Theft Auto V will no doubt remember the little throwaway line by Lester during the planning of the first heist.
There was an Eastern European guy making moves in Liberty City, but he went quiet.
He's offhandedly mentioned a couple more times here and in GTA Online, but other than that, Niko's life of crime is over and done with. Michael Hollick, the real-life man behind the voice and motion capture for Niko Bellic, sadly had a falling out with Rockstar Games and has said that he'll never work with them again, forcing Rockstar to either recast the character if they want to bring him back later on, or, and I believe this for the best, retire the character completely. And honestly, I think retiring Niko fits so well with the narrative. Niko doesn't win. Rockstar has openly admitted that there are no true paths to Niko's ending, but both of them work in this case. Regardless of who he loses in the end, his life still continues and he's forced to carry on. And while at the end of the game, Niko was rewarded with $250,000, that's still pretty minuscule compared to what other protagonists end up with in their own respective games. Realistically, he still has enough to settle down with a quieter life and step away from the violence and destruction that have surrounded him for so many years. In Liberty City, Niko loses either his heart or his soul, after just having seen it's possible to preserve both. Rage and revenge get him nowhere, and he becomes another hopeless individual, swept away into the vastness of history. Hey, it's me, Doodle Sammy. If you enjoy my content and you don't happen to be one of the 10 or so people I know watching this, feel free to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to help my videos find an audience. Even your time here has helped my channel grow, and know that I really do appreciate it. This has honestly become a passion project for me, and I have a progressively ever-growing list of games on my Google Docs that I've been writing about that I want to take another look at. Comment down below on what you thought of Niko's story, or your opinion on GTA 4 in general. But remember, if you're late to the party, it's still going on, so you might as well enjoy yourself. I'll see you next time.
You want some weed? I do not need any marijuana, Jacob. I can think clearly enough.
All right, Niko, man.